The sun softly illuminated St. Joseph's Church in DuPont, turning an ordinary Saturday afternoon into something special, almost magical. Flowers, white ribbons, and balloons decorated every corner. Today, 30-year-old Aisha Thompson was to become the wife of 35-year-old Marcus Johnson, ending their 3-year affair with a solemn "I do" in the face of God and loved ones. Aisha stood in front of the mirror in the bride's room, smoothing the exquisite lace on her dress with her hands. Her dark skin glowed, accentuated by the soft white satin. Her long curls were arranged in an elegant hairstyle adorned with pearl studs. With slightly trembling fingers, she adjusted the veil, not believing fully that this day had finally arrived. "You're the most beautiful bride I've ever seen," said Tamara Williams, Aisha's best friend, helping her with the finishing touches. "Marcus is a real lucky guy." Aisha smiled, but a faint shadow of worry flashed in her brown eyes. "Thank you, Tam. You're the only one who's been with me all the way." Tamara squeezed her hand understandingly. She was the only one who knew the entire path Aisha had traveled, all the difficulties and pain of transforming from Andrew Thompson into the woman she'd always felt she was. The years of hormone therapy, the painful surgeries, the constant fear of being rejected, all of that was behind her. Now, looking at Aisha, no one would have guessed her past. She was just a beautiful, confident woman, ready to marry the man she loved. "Are you sure you don't want to tell him?" Tamara asked quietly, adjusting her bouquet of white roses. "Now, before the ceremony?" Aisha shook her head, pressing her lips together resolutely. "No, I'm not that person anymore. Andrew is a thing of the past. Marcus loves me as I am now. Why rekindle something that's long dead? But if he happens to find out—" "He won't find out," Aisha cut her off. "We'll move to another city after the honeymoon. No one will know my past there. We'll start from scratch." There was a knock on the door, interrupting their conversation, and Jamal, Marcus's older brother, entered the room. His tall figure in a black suit and a neat tie gave the impression of austerity and thoroughness, which was further emphasized by his hard facial features. 15 minutes to the ceremony," he said, giving Aisha a cold, appraising look. Jamal had never made much secret of the fact that he didn't like his brother's fiancée. Too perfect, too sophisticated for their working-class family. Something about her seemed fake to him, wrong. But Marcus was blinded by love and listened to no warnings. "Thank you, Jamal," Aisha replied with a strained smile. As the door closed, Tamara frowned. "I don't like the way he's looking at you. It's like he's digging with his eyes." "It doesn't matter," Aisha dismissed, checking her reflection one last time. "All that matters is that Marcus loves me. You know, Jamal has always been a complicated man. His sense of ownership is stronger than others. He's just afraid of losing influence over his brother." Friends and family gathered in the main hall of the church. About 100 people filled the wooden pews, exchanging whispers and waiting for the bride to appear. Marcus stood at the altar, nervously adjusting his bow tie. In his 35, he had finally found the one he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. A successful owner of a construction company, he could afford a lavish wedding and was happy to fulfill Aisha's every wish. Jamal took a seat next to his brother as a witness, holding a crumpled envelope in his pocket. His face remained impenetrable, but a storm of emotions raged inside. A week before the wedding, he had received an anonymous letter with photos and information about Aisha, information that turned his whole world upside down. He couldn't believe his eyes. The perfect woman his brother was about to marry was once a man named Andrew. It seemed to Jamal like a monstrous deception, a betrayal he couldn't allow. He wanted to show the letter to Marcus right away, but something stopped him. Perhaps a shadow of doubt. The envelope had come without a return address, and the photos could be fake. Or maybe a simple reluctance to ruin his brother's happiness a few days before the wedding. But as the ceremony approached, Jamal's confidence that he should intervene only grew. The music grew louder, all the guests rose from their seats, and the church doors swung open. Aisha entered, radiant and beautiful, accompanied by the elderly uncle who had replaced her father. Her white dress with a lace train flowed down her trail, making it seem as if she were floating above the floor. Marcus gazed at her with adoration. To him, she was perfection. When they had met 3 years ago at a charity event, he had immediately realized it was fate. Since then, every day had only made him more certain that Aisha was the woman he wanted to grow old with. The ceremony went like clockwork. Vows were exchanged, rings put on, a long kiss to the applause of the guests. The air was saturated with happiness and hope. The festive banquet was organized in the banquet hall of the DuPont Grand Hotel, which was decorated according to Aisha's wishes, elegantly with white and gold predominating. Fresh flowers in tall vases, delicate candles, crystal glasses on each table. Everything spoke of the impeccable taste of the newlyweds. The first dance of the newlyweds caused tears of emotion among the guests. They moved as one, as if created for each other, without taking their eyes off their partner's eyes. "I'm the luckiest man on earth," Marcus whispered in his newlywed wife's ear. "You're perfect, just perfect." Aisha kissed him, afraid that this day might be over, that her fairy tale would be ruined if the truth came out. She looked at the cheering guests, at Tamra raising her glass to them, and tried to memorize every second of this day. Jamal watched them, sipping his whiskey nervously. His thoughts were darker than a cloud. He saw the way his younger brother looked at his wife, the way love blinded him, made him vulnerable. After the third drink, Jamal made a decision. He must protect his brother, even if only at the cost of his temporary happiness. Choosing a moment when Aisha had gone to talk to the guests, he called Marcus over. "We need to talk," he said seriously. "Alone. About your wife." Marcus frowned, unhappy with his brother's tone. "Now? On my wedding day?" "That's exactly why," Jamal insisted, gripping his elbow tightly. "Let's go to my room. It's important." Reluctantly, Marcus followed his brother, apologizing to the guests with a short, "I'll be right back." Aisha escorted them out with a worried look. Something in Jamal's face made her heart clench with a premonition of trouble. "Is something wrong?" Tamara asked, noticing her friend's concern. "I don't know," Aisha replied, keeping her eyes fixed on the receding figures of her husband and his brother. "Jamal has never approved of my relationship with Marcus. He doesn't think I'm right for their family." "I don't care what he thinks," Tamara snorted. "This is your day. You deserve to be happy." Aisha nodded, but the anxiety didn't leave her. She decided to go to the bride's room to fix her makeup and gather her thoughts. Tamara volunteered to go with her, but Aisha assured her friend that she could handle it on her own and that she needed a few minutes of quiet. In Jamal's suite, Marcus was losing patience. He wanted to get back to his wife and guests, not listen to another nagging from his brother. "Well, what was so important you wanted to tell me?" Jamal pulled an envelope from the inside pocket of his jacket and tossed it on the table. "Open it. I received this a week ago, anonymously." Marcus reluctantly took the envelope. Inside were photos and documents. His face changed with each page he looked at. First bewilderment, then shock, disbelief, and finally anger. The photos showed Aisha in the process of transformation. Documents showed a name change, from Andrew Thompson to Aisha Thompson. Medical reports of surgeries, documentation of hormone therapy, an old passport, all of it left no doubt about the authenticity of the information. "It can't be," Marcus whispered, turning pale. "It's a forgery." "Check the dates, the names," Jamal insisted, putting his hand on his brother's shoulder. "It all fits. Your perfect girl is a liar. She's been lying to you this whole time." Marcus looked up at his brother, his eyes wide with pain and confusion. "Why didn't you show me this before?" "I wasn't sure if the documents were real. I didn't want to ruin your days before the wedding. I thought maybe she'd tell you herself. But now you're married. She tricked you into marrying—" Jamal didn't finish the sentence, seeing his brother's face contort. Marcus didn't listen. He grabbed the papers and ran out of the room. He needed to hear the truth from Aisha herself. Aisha was standing in front of the mirror in the bride's room when the door swung open. Marcus stood on the threshold, his face contorted with anger and pain. "Was it true?" he asked, tossing the photos onto the dressing table. "You were a man?" The color drained from Aisha's face. Her lips quivered, but she couldn't say a word. The fear she had lived with for years had finally caught up with her on her happiest day. Jamal appeared behind Marcus's back, his eyes cold and determined. "Answer my brother," he demanded, entering the room. "Marcus, I can explain." Aisha finally squeezed out, taking a step toward her husband. "I've always been a woman inside. My body just didn't fit who I felt I was. I wanted to tell you many times, but I was afraid of losing you." "You lied to me!" Marcus shouted, backing away. "All this time, our relationship, our wedding, all lies! No, no!" Aisha walked over to him, holding out her arms. "I love you. I'm the same woman you fell in love with. Nothing has changed. I was just afraid you wouldn't accept me if you found out." Marcus backed away even further, his face contorted with disgust. He couldn't look at the woman he'd called his wife an hour ago. "Don't touch me!" He almost spat the words out. "I don't know who you are." Aisha fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face, smearing her carefully applied makeup. "Marcus, please. I'm still the same. I love you." But Marcus wasn't listening anymore. He turned and ran out of the room, leaving Aisha sobbing on the floor. Jamal stayed behind, closing the door behind his brother. He looked at Aisha with cold hatred. "You ruined my brother's life," he said quietly. "You dishonored our family." Aisha lifted her crying face. "It wasn't me," she whispered. "It was you who showed him the documents just today. You ruined everything." "No, you ruined everything with your lies," Jamal replied, looking down at her. Jamal left the room after a while, closing the door tightly behind him. Tamara, worried about her friend's long absence, decided to see if she was all right. She knocked on the door of the bride's room but got no answer. Carefully opening the door, she saw Aisha lying on the floor in a white dress stained with blood. For a moment, Tamara stood in a daze, unable to believe her eyes. Then a scream burst from her throat that tore through the festive atmosphere of the wedding, turning a day of joy into a day of mourning. The guests rushed to the scream in panic, Marcus collapsing to his knees in front of his wife's body. "Aisha! No, no, no!" Marcus shouted, hugging the bloody body. "Somebody call an ambulance!" But it was too late. The perfect wedding had turned into a nightmare. Aisha Thompson, who only an hour ago had become Aisha Johnson, was dead. Victoria Clark parked her black Ford outside the DuPont Grand Hotel and gloomily glanced at the festive decorations that now seemed out of place. The 42-year-old female detective had been with the DuPont Police Department for 17 years, but murder at a wedding was something new even to her. In the purple glow of the police flashers, the white ribbons and flowers looked ominous. "What have we got?" she asked, approaching the young officer on duty at the cordon tape. "Bride murdered in her room, 2 shots to the chest, presumably from a small-caliber handgun," the officer replied, checking his notebook. The body was discovered by the victim's girlfriend at approximately 18 hours and 30 minutes. The groom and his brother were seen leaving the room shortly before that. Victoria nodded, mentally compiling the first picture of the incident. Witnesses? About 100 guests. Most were in the banquet room and didn't see anything. The hotel staff is being interviewed right now. The groom, his brother, and the bridesmaid are in the interrogation room. Weapons? No weapons. Initial inspection shows no signs of forced entry. Victim apparently knew her killer. Victoria put on latex gloves and entered the hotel. The elevator took her to the 4th floor, where the bride's room was located. Forensic experts were already at work, photographing the crime scene and gathering evidence. "Detective Clark," she nodded to the chief examiner, a dark-skinned man with glasses. "What can you tell me?" "Death occurred between 18 and 1830, he answered, still on the job. 2 bullets, both in the region of the heart. Death was almost instantaneous. There was no sign of struggle. She either didn't expect an attack or she knew her attacker and wasn't afraid of him. Victoria got close to the body. Aisha Thompson, no, now Aisha Johnson, was lying on the floor in a wedding dress that was stained with blood. Her face, despite the traces of leaking mascara, looked peaceful, with no signs of fear or pain. That was odd for a victim of a violent death. "What about these photos?" Victoria asked, pointing to the pictures scattered on the floor. "We don't know yet. They are clearly related to the victim, but their significance remains to be seen." Victoria picked up one of the photographs. It was of a young man who looked subtly like Aisha. The detective frowned, putting the first pieces of the puzzle together. When she had finished examining the crime scene, she headed to the interview room where the main witnesses were waiting for her. The first one she decided to talk to was Tamara Williams, the bride's best friend and the person who had discovered the body. Tamara sat at the table, her dark eyes reddened with tears, and her hands shaking as she brought a glass of water to her lips. "Miss Williams," Victoria began, sitting down across from her. "I'm so sorry for your loss. I realize this is a difficult time for you, but I need to ask you a few questions." Tamara nodded, clutching the glass. "Tell me what happened today. Everything you remember." "Everything was so good," Tamara began in a shaky voice. "The wedding was just perfect. Aisha was so happy." Her voice trailed off, and she took a deep breath to calm herself. "After the ceremony and the first dance, I noticed that Marcus's brother, Jamal, took him aside. They looked tense, then walked off somewhere together. Aisha was concerned. She decided to go to her room, saying she wanted to fix her makeup." "What time was that?" "Around 6 p.m., maybe a little earlier. I offered to go with her, but she said she wanted to be alone. When she didn't come back 30 minutes later, I went to see if she was all right." "And what did you find?" Tamara closed her eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks. She was lying on the floor. Blood was everywhere, her beautiful dress. Tamara couldn't continue and burst into tears. Victoria waited silently for the woman to calm down. In questioning witnesses, especially those shaken by tragedy, patience was key. "Did you see anyone entering or leaving Aisha's room?" Tamara shook her head. "No, but the hallway is long, and I was coming from the side of the banquet hall. Someone could have left in a different direction." Victoria nodded, taking notes. "Miss Williams, what do you know about these photos?" She placed the pictures collected from the crime scene on the table. Tamara turned pale as she looked at the photos. "Where did you get them?" "They were scattered near Aisha's body. Do you know what they mean?" Tamara remained silent, clearly struggling with herself. Victoria waited, not rushing her. "Detective, what I'm about to tell you, it's personal. Very personal. Aisha wouldn't want it to go public. I understand that. But this is a murder case, Miss Williams. If this information is important to the investigation, I need to know it." Tamara took a deep breath. Aisha was a transgender woman. Her name used to be Andrew Thompson. She went through a transformation 6 years ago before she met Marcus. Victoria kept her expression neutral, even though this information explained a lot. "Did Marcus know about this?" "No. Aisha was afraid he wouldn't accept her if he knew the truth. She planned to tell him after the wedding, when they were already married, or maybe never tell him. Andrew was dead to her, you know. She had completely identified herself as a woman." "Who else knew?" "As far as I know, just me and her doctors. Her parents died when she was still Andrew. She had no other close relatives." "How do you think those pictures ended up in the room?" Tamara shook her head. "I don't know, but if Marcus saw them, if he found out the truth on the day of the wedding—" She was silent, unable to say the terrible guess out loud. Victoria nodded understandingly. The motive for the murder was becoming obvious. A man learning that his newlywed wife had once been a man, shock, anger, a sense of deception could push him to a desperate act. Finished with Tamara, Victoria moved on to question Marcus Johnson. The groom sat staring blankly into space. His hands, still in his wedding suit, rested limply on the table. He looked not like a murderer, but like a man who had lost everything. "Mr. Johnson," Victoria began softly, "I need you to tell me what happened today." Marcus looked up slowly, his eyes deep in pain. "I married the woman I loved most in the world, and an hour later she was dead." His voice sounded monotonous, lifeless. "What else do you need to know?" "Where were you between 6 and 7:30 in the evening?" Marcus swallowed. "My brother Jamal showed me something, documents and photographs, about Aisha's past." "And what was that?" Marcus stammered, unable to say the words. "She used to be a man. All those 3 years, she lied to me. Our relationship, our love, it was all based on lies." "How did you react when you found out?" "I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. I went to her to hear the truth from her. She didn't deny it. She tried to explain, but I couldn't listen. I left." Where did you go after you left Aisha? Marcus rubbed his face with his hands. I don't remember exactly. Wandered around the hotel. Maybe I was in the parking lot. I had to think, come to my senses. Then I heard a scream, and I came back. Tamara found Aisha. Did you see anyone suspicious near Aisha's room? No, I told you. I wasn't there. And your brother? Where was he? Marcus frowned. I don't know. We split up after he showed me the papers. He must have gone back to the banquet. Who do you think would want Aisha dead? Marcus shook his head. Everyone loved Aisha. She was perfect. His voice trembled. At least, that's what I thought. Victoria watched his reaction carefully. Marcus looked genuinely shocked, but that didn't prove anything yet. Many murderers were good actors. Do you own a gun, Mr. Johnson? No, I never liked guns. Thank you for your cooperation. That's all for now, but I may have more questions. Victoria was the last person to interview Jamal Johnson. Unlike his brother, 38-year-old Jamal seemed collected and in control of his emotions. He sat up straight with his hands on the table and met the detective's gaze without a shadow of embarrassment. Mr. Johnson, tell me what happened today, Victoria began. I was a witness at my brother's wedding, Jamal answered in a steady voice. After the ceremony, I received an envelope, an anonymous envelope. It contained documents about Aisha Thompson's past, that she had once been a man. I showed them to Marcus. He was shocked and went to talk to her. I followed him to be supportive. They talked, Marcus left. I told Aisha that she had ruined my brother's life and left too. Came back to the banquet. Then there was a scream, and we all found out Aisha was dead. When exactly did you receive this envelope? Are you sure it was after the ceremony? Jamal frowned. Yes, of course it was. Someone handed it to me during the banquet. Who did? I don't know. It was a waiter or someone on the staff. I wasn't paying attention. Victoria made a note of it. This was the first discrepancy. Tamara mentioned noticing Jamal's tense conversation with his brother before the banquet. Where is that envelope and its contents now? Marcus probably has it. He took the documents with him when he went to see Aisha. I understand that things were strained between you and Aisha? Jamal shrugged his shoulders. I never thought she was right for my brother. Too perfect, you know, and it turns out I was right. She'd been cheating on him for years. Where were you between 6 o'clock and 7:30 last night? Like I said, after I talked to Aisha, I went back to the banquet, talked to the guests, had a couple glasses of champagne. Can anyone confirm that? There were a lot of guests there. Someone must have seen me. Victoria nodded, not showing that she had noticed another discrepancy. None of the guests interviewed mentioned seeing Jamal in the banquet hall at the time. Do you own a gun, Mr. Johnson? No. Victoria saw him look away for a split second. Probably a lie, but there was no way to tell for sure yet. Were you close to your brother? Of course. We always supported each other. Financially, too? Jamal tensed slightly. Marcus helped me from time to time. My business isn't as successful as his. How significant was that help? I don't see what it has to do with the murder, Jamal replied sharply. I'm just trying to get a complete picture. We're checking all the leads. Okay, Jamal continued reluctantly. The last year has been difficult. My business almost went bankrupt. Marcus helped me out by lending me a large sum of money. I planned to pay it back as soon as I got back on my feet. Do you think his marriage to Aisha might have affected your financial situation? Jamal frowned. What do you mean? Well, new wife, new priorities, perhaps less money to support your brother? Are you implying that I had a motive to kill Aisha? That's absurd. I loved my brother and I only wanted what was best for him. No one's making accusations, Mr. Johnson. I'm just gathering information. After the interviews, Victoria returned to the crime scene. Something about Jamal's testimony didn't add up. It was too smooth, too deliberate. And these discrepancies in the timing of the envelope's receipt and its whereabouts after the conversation with Aisha. She approached one of the technicians examining the evidence. Did you find anything on the victim's hands? Gunshot residue? Signs of a struggle? Nothing like that, the technician replied. If she fought back, there were no traces, no gunpowder particles, which rules out suicide. What about the suspects? Marcus Johnson tested negative for gunshot residue. Jamal Johnson's results are still pending. Victoria nodded and continued to look around the room. Under the bed, she noticed something shiny. Bending over, she pulled out a cufflink with the initials J. Jamal Johnson. She wondered how it had gotten there if he had, according to him, just talked to Aisha and left. Even more alarming was her information from the officer interviewing the hotel staff. None of the waiters had handed any envelopes to Jamal Johnson during the banquet, but one of the hotel staffers recalled seeing Jamal receive some sort of package from a courier a week ago when he came to the hotel to discuss wedding details. A theory began to take shape. Jamal had known about Aisha's past for a week. He hadn't shown the documents to his brother right away, but had been biding his time. Why? What had changed on the day of the wedding? Perhaps after seeing how in love his brother was, how willing he was to give everything to Aisha, Jamal realized that his financial support was in jeopardy. Victoria checked the Johnson brothers' financial records. Marcus was a successful businessman. His construction company was thriving. Jamal owned a small investment firm that had recently been making losses. Over the past year, Marcus had transferred to his brother's account an amount equal to almost a third of his annual income. A week before the wedding, Jamal's loan request had been turned down, the first one in their business relationship. The case was taking a new turn. Marcus had a motive to kill his wife in a fit of rage when he learned the truth, but Jamal's motive was far more cold and calculating. If Aisha stayed in Marcus's life, his brother's financial support could end, especially if Marcus found out about her past later and forgave her for lying to him. And Jamal seemed to have gotten information about Aisha's past in advance and was waiting for the right time. Victoria decided to talk to Tamara again. "You said that Aisha was planning to move to another city with Marcus after the honeymoon?" "Yes," Tamara confirmed. "They were going to Seattle. Marcus wanted to open a branch of his company there, and Aisha could start fresh, where no one knew her past." "Did Jamal know about these plans?" Tamara wondered. "I'm not sure, but Marcus mentioned that his brother wasn't very happy when he heard about the possible move. They had always been very close, and Jamal relied on Marcus for a lot of things." The picture was becoming clearer and clearer. Jamal was afraid of losing his influence over his brother and his financial support. Aisha was a threat not only because of her past, but because she could take Marcus far away from his brother, cutting off their close bond. Victoria turned back to the evidence list. The weapons still hadn't been found. If Jamal really did kill Aisha, he had to have gotten rid of the gun somewhere. The hotel was cordoned off as soon as the body was found, so he couldn't have gotten far. "Check trash cans, ventilation shafts, any place where you can quickly hide a weapon," she ordered. An hour later, one of the officers reported the find. "Detective Clark, we found a gun in the garbage chute of the service area. Small caliber, looks like the murder weapon. Prints? Wiped clean, but ballistics will confirm if they're the same bullets." Victoria nodded. The case was getting clearer and clearer, but there was no direct evidence against Jamal Johnson. She needed to dig deeper, look for witnesses who might have seen him in the hallway after Marcus left Aisha's room. She'd reviewed the security footage in the hallway, but unfortunately, the camera pointed at the door of the bride's room appeared to be disabled. An accident or a deliberate act? Her musings were interrupted by the ringing of her cell phone. "Detective Clark," she answered. "The gunshot residue test for Jamal Johnson came back positive," the lab tech said. "Microparticles were found on the sleeve of his jacket." Victoria smiled. The first solid piece of evidence. Now there was a connection to be made between Jamal and the gun found in the garbage chute. She decided to talk to Marcus again, now about his brother. "Mr. Johnson, does your brother own a gun?" she asked bluntly. Marcus looked surprised. "I don't think so. Although..." He fell silent, remembering. 2 weeks ago, he had mentioned that he was going to buy a gun for self-defense. There had been an increase in robberies in the neighborhood where his office was located. I don't know if he did it. Was he ever violent, especially towards Aisha? Marcus frowned. Jamal had never liked Aisha, it was true. He thought she wasn't right for our family, that she was too. Perfect. He grinned bitterly. How ironic that sounds now. But there's a great distance from dislike to murder. You don't think my brother... I'm considering all possibilities, Mr. Johnson. Was your brother financially dependent on you? Yes. His business had fallen on hard times lately. I helped him out, of course. He's my brother. Did you recently deny him another loan? Marcus looked surprised. How did you find out? Yes, a week ago. The wedding preparations were costly, and I told him I could only help after I got back from my honeymoon. He was disappointed, but he seemed to understand. And how did he react to your plans to move to Seattle? Marcus looked up, suddenly realizing where the conversation was going. He was against it. Said I was leaving my family for a woman I'd only known for 3 years. Victoria saw the agonized realization of the possible truth reflected on Marcus's face. Do you think Jamal could have... For the money? That's crazy. Sometimes people do crazy things when they feel like they're losing control of their lives, Victoria said softly, especially if they're used to relying on others. She left Marcus alone with his thoughts and returned to her investigation. She now had enough probable cause to get a search warrant for Jamal Johnson's apartment and office. Perhaps there would be additional evidence linking him to Aisha's murder. The case was beginning to take clear shape, but Victoria knew she had to proceed with caution. Jamal was smart and calculating. If he'd really killed Aisha, he'd probably tried to cover his tracks. But every killer always makes a mistake, and it's the detective's job to find it. Victoria looked at the photograph of the happy couple, Marcus and Aisha, taken just hours ago, and felt the acute injustice of what had happened. Regardless of Aisha's past, she didn't deserve to die like this. And Victoria was determined to find her killer and bring him to justice. The investigation was just beginning, but Detective Clark already felt she was on the right track. Now it was up to her to gather enough evidence for the truth to come out. The next morning, Victoria Clark was greeted by gloomy skies and drizzling rain. She'd spent most of the night at the station, analyzing the evidence she'd collected and building a timeline of events. Now, sitting at her desk with her third cup of coffee, she waited for the forensic results that could be decisive in this case. There was a knock on her office door, and a young officer entered with a folder in his hands. "Detective Clark, ballistics results," he said, holding out the documents. The bullets recovered from the victim's body matched the gun found in the garbage disposal. Victoria nodded, looking over the report. It was an important step in the investigation, but still not enough to bring charges. They needed to link the gun directly to Jamal Johnson. "What about the prints?" she asked. The gun had been thoroughly wiped down, but forensics found a partial print on one of the cartridges in the magazine. Comparison with the database is still pending. And the surveillance footage? Techs recovered the deleted files from the hotel's server. Someone intentionally erased the footage from the fourth-floor hallway camera between 7 o'clock and 9 p.m., but a backup copy was saved on an external server. Victoria straightened in her chair, her eyes lighting up with interest. "Show me." The officer turned on his laptop and opened the video file. The footage showed the fourth-floor corridor. The timestamp showed 18 hours and 15 minutes. Marcus and Jamal appeared in the footage, heading toward the bride's room. They went inside, and a few minutes later, Marcus ran out of there in obvious excitement. Jamal stayed in the room. "Fast forward?" Victoria asked. The tape showed Jamal leaving the room at 18 hours and 24 minutes, looking around and walking briskly toward the service stairs. At 18 hours and 31 minutes, Tamara appears in the hallway, knocks on the door of the room, and receiving no answer, goes inside. A few seconds later, her shout is heard. "Check the records from the service stairs and the back door," Victoria ordered. Soon they found Jamal on another camera. He was coming down the service stairs, then going through the kitchen to the garbage chute. His hand was tucked into the inside pocket of his jacket, and as he stepped away from the garbage chute, the pocket looked empty. "This is it," Victoria said quietly. "We have footage of him getting rid of the gun. Check his credit cards and bank accounts for the last month. Look for any transactions related to gun purchases." While the officer was running errands, a technician from the electronic forensics department entered the office. "Detective, we've analyzed the victim's phone," she said, handing over the report. "We found deleted messages on it, which we were able to recover." A week before the murder, Aisha received several threatening texts from an anonymous number. Victoria looked at the transcripts of the messages. "I know who you really are, Andrew. I suggest you cancel the wedding before it's too late." Marcus deserves a real woman, not a fake one. If you don't disappear from his life, I'll tell him the truth. The last text was sent the day before the wedding. Tomorrow, everyone will know your dirty secret. Were you able to trace where those messages were sent from? Victoria asked. It's a one-time prepaid number, but we traced where the phone was activated. It's the DuPont Mall 2 weeks ago. They must have security footage. Victoria nodded. Request those tapes immediately, and see if the browser history on Jamal's phone has any searches about buying prepaid phones or how to remove traces of digital presence. Events were beginning to form a clear picture. Jamal, having learned about Aisha's past, began planning how to get rid of her. At first, he tried to intimidate her, hoping she would break the engagement herself. When that didn't work, he decided to show the truth to Marcus at her most emotional moment, the wedding day, and then used the ensuing chaos to kill Aisha and frame his brother. There was another knock on the door. It was the officer in charge of the financials. Detective, we found an interesting transaction. 2 weeks ago, Jamal Johnson withdrew $3,000 in cash from his account. The same day he visited the DuPont Mall. That's where the prepaid cell phone was activated, Victoria noted. Maybe he was buying not only the phone, but also guns on the black market. She gathered up all the reports and headed to the department head. An hour later, she had an arrest warrant for Jamal Johnson on suspicion of Aisha Thompson's murder. Victoria and 2 officers went to Jamal's house. As they approached his apartment, they noticed him hurriedly carrying a suitcase out to his car. "Jamal Johnson!" Victoria shouted, getting out of the car with her gun at the ready. "DuPont police, stay where you are!" Jamal froze for a moment, then dropped the suitcase and tried to run. But the officers were faster. Within seconds, he was on the ground, handcuffs snapping on his wrists. "Jamal Johnson, you are under arrest on suspicion of the murder of Aisha Thompson," Victoria said as she read him his rights. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Jamal didn't resist, but his eyes flashed with lightning. "You can't prove anything," he said through gritted teeth. "She deserved what she got. She lied to everyone, including my brother." "Save your explanations for the interrogation," Victoria said, helping him up. At the station, Jamal was led into an interrogation room. Victoria let him sit alone for an hour while she pieced all the evidence together. It was a standard tactic to give the suspect time to think, to increase his anxiety. When she finally entered the interrogation room, Jamal sat stone-faced with his hands folded on the table. "Mr. Johnson," Victoria began, laying out the photographs, message printouts, and forensic reports in front of him. "We have evidence that you sent threatening messages to Aisha Thompson from a prepaid cell phone. We have surveillance footage of you going in and out of her room at the time of the murder. We found the gun that killed her, and we have video of you disposing of it in the garbage chute. We found gunpowder residue on your clothes. Your partial print was found on one of the bullets." She laid out the evidence in front of him, methodically, one by one. "It all adds up to an incontrovertible pattern. You killed Aisha Thompson. The only question is why." Jamal remained silent, staring at the evidence in front of him. His jaw was tense, his fingers clenched to white knuckles. "I want a lawyer," he finally said. "That's your right." Victoria nodded. "But consider this. If you cooperate, tell your side of the story, it might help you. The court takes voluntary confession and remorse into account." Jamal grinned. "Remorse? You think I'm remorseful? I was protecting my brother, my family. Protecting him from who? The woman your brother loved." "She wasn't a woman!" Jamal suddenly shouted, pounding his fist on the table. "She was a fraud, a freak! She fooled my brother, forced him to marry her, knowing he would never have agreed if he had known the truth." Victoria remained calm, giving Jamal a chance to speak. "So you admit that you killed her?" Jamal took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. "Yes," he said at last. "I killed her, and I would do it again. I tried to warn her, sent messages, hoping she'd go away on her own. But this one..." He hesitated for words. The stubborn thing decided to continue the deception. "Tell me what happened in the bride's room." Jamal leaned back in his chair. "I received an anonymous letter about her past a week before the wedding. I didn't believe it at first, did my own investigation. When I was convinced it was true, I tried to get her to leave without a scandal. She refused. So I decided to show the evidence to Marcus on the day of the wedding. Why the wedding day? Why not before? I was hoping she'd come to her senses. Besides. He was silent for a moment. Marcus was so happy. I didn't want to ruin it until the last moment. But when I saw her shining in that dress, everyone applauding the perfect couple, I knew I had to act. And what happened in the room? Marcus saw the evidence. He was furious. He yelled at her, then he ran away. I stayed, told her she'd ruined my brother's life. She blamed me, said I ruined it by showing her the documents. That pissed me off. She wasn't even remorseful, you know. She thought she was right. So you decided to kill her? Jamal lowered his head. It wasn't planned. I bought the gun for self-defense 2 weeks ago. I carried it with me because of the increase in robberies. At the time, I just wanted to protect my brother from embarrassment. I imagined how everyone would laugh at him when they found out the truth. How his business would suffer. How she'd take him to Seattle, away from his family, away from me. Were you afraid of losing his support? Of being financially dependent? Jamal looked up, anger in his eyes. It's not about money. Marcus and I have always been together. Since we were kids. We've always been there for each other. And she comes out of nowhere with a fake identity and ruins everything. So you shot her to protect your brother? Yes. Jamal answered firmly. And I would do it again. Marcus deserves a normal life. A real woman who will bear him children. Victoria wrote down his statement with professional detachment, though inside she was seething with indignation. After you shot Aisha, you disposed of the gun in the garbage disposal and returned to the banquet, pretending nothing had happened? Yeah, I knew Marcus would be under suspicion. He had motive, but I was sure I could prove his innocence when the heat died down. In the meantime, it was the best decision. Victoria closed her notebook. Jamal Johnson, you are officially under arrest for the murder of Aisha Thompson. Your confession has been recorded and will be used in court. As Jamal was led away to his cell, Victoria felt a familiar mixture of satisfaction at having solved the case and bitterness at not being able to bring the victim back to life. She gathered all the paperwork and headed to the prosecutor's office to begin preparing for the trial. On the way, she ran into Marcus, who had come to the station after hearing about his brother's arrest. Was it true? He asked, his eyes red from sleep deprivation and tears. Jamal killed Aisha? Victoria nodded. He confessed, I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson. Marcus shook his head, unable to believe what had happened. Why? Because of the money? Because I was helping him? No, Victoria replied softly. He claims he did it to protect you, from the shame, as he calls it, from living with a man he believes cheated you. Marcus sank into the nearest chair, covering his face with his hands. I was so angry when I found out the truth, he whispered. I felt cheated. But then when I saw her body, I realized I loved her. Not for who she used to be, but for who she had become. For her smile, her voice, her care. Now I had lost both her and my brother. Victoria put a hand on his shoulder. You're not responsible for what happened, Mr. Johnson. Not Aisha's murder, not your brother's decisions. But if I hadn't run away, if I had stayed and listened to her, she might still be alive. You couldn't have known what would happen. No one could have. Marcus looked up, his eyes deep in pain. Can I see my brother? Victoria nodded. I'll arrange it, but keep in mind, he's not sorry for what he did. He really believes he did the right thing. I know, Marcus replied bitterly. Jamal has always been stubborn, and always thought he knew what was best for me. Later, watching the brothers meeting through the one-way mirror, Victoria pondered the cost of prejudice and bigotry. Jamal sat across from Marcus, still convinced he was right. Marcus, on the other hand, looked broken, having realized too late what true love and acceptance were. I wanted to protect you, Jamal said. She lied to you from the beginning. It wasn't your decision, Jamal, Marcus replied. You took away my opportunity to forgive her, the chance to decide for myself if I could live with her past. You took away the man I loved. You would have come to your senses a couple of years later when the initial shock had worn off, when you realized you were living with a man in a woman's body. She wasn't a man, Marcus exclaimed. She was a woman who had gone through hell to become herself. And now you're in hell too, Jamal, and so am I. Victoria turned away from the mirror. She didn't need to hear more. The story was simple and tragic. A man, unable to accept differences, decided he had the right to take another man's life. Leaving the station late that night, Victoria met Tamara, who had come to pick up Aisha's personal belongings that had been seized during the crime scene investigation. "Thank you for finding him," Tamara said as she accepted the bag of her friend's belongings. "Aisha didn't deserve to die like this." "No one deserves to die like that," Victoria replied, "especially on what should have been the happiest day of her life." "You know, she was afraid that Marcus wouldn't accept her if he knew the truth," Tamara said quietly. "But I've always believed that love can overcome prejudice, that when you truly love someone, their past matters less than their present and future." Victoria nodded. It looked like she was right after all, fearing not Marcus but his brother. "The tragedy is," Tamara said with a bitter smile, "it appears that Marcus would have been able to accept her. Maybe not right away, but he would have. Jamal had robbed them both of that chance." They stood on the steps of the police station, two women bound now by their shared knowledge of this tragedy. The rain had stopped, and the last rays of the setting sun colored the damp asphalt red-orange. "What will happen to Marcus?" Victoria asked. "I don't know," Tamara answered honestly. "He lost two of his closest people on the same day. One because of death, the other because of betrayal. That's not an easy thing to deal with. Tell him that if he needs help, psychological support, the department can provide it." Tamara nodded. "I will, thank you, Detective, for everything." Victoria watched Tamara walk away, clutching the bag of her friend's belongings in her hands. There were no winners in this story, only losers. Prejudice, fear, rejection, all of it had caused the young woman's life to be cut short on a day that should have been the beginning of her true happiness. Aisha's funeral took place 2 weeks later. Victoria, as the lead detective on the case, attended the ceremony. Marcus stood by the coffin, thin and gaunt, not looking like the happy groom he had been so recently. Next to him was Tamara and a few friends who had come to say goodbye to Aisha. After the ceremony, Marcus approached Victoria. "Jamal's trial starts in a month," he said. "I'll be testifying against him." "That's a tough decision," Victoria said. "He's your brother, after all." "The brother who killed my wife," Marcus replied bitterly. "You know, I've been thinking a lot these days about what it means to be a real man, a real woman, about what's more important, what we're born with or what we become. Aisha was the truest woman I've ever known, brave, loving, loyal, and my brother, he only thought about how things should look in the eyes of others." Victoria nodded, respecting his position. "What will you do now?" "I still plan to move to Seattle," Marcus answered. "Open a branch of the company there. Too many memories here in DuPont. Tamara decided to come with me. She was Aisha's best friend, and now we're helping each other cope with the loss." "It's good that you're not alone," Victoria said. Marcus looked at the freshly dug grave where Aisha now lay. "You know what I can't forgive myself for? That in that moment, in the bride's room, I rejected her. That my last words to her were full of anger. She died thinking I couldn't accept her for who she was." "Don't torture yourself with that," Victoria said softly. "You couldn't have known what would happen, and your reaction was natural for someone who had received such a shock." "Maybe," Marcus replied, "but now I have to live with that knowledge, and with the realization that if I had been more open, less judgmental, maybe she would still be alive. She could have told me the truth sooner, without fear of losing me." Victoria understood his feelings. As a detective, she'd seen all too often how fear and prejudice led to tragedies, how the human inability to accept differences ruins lives. "What's important is what you realize now," she said, "and that this tragedy has changed you for the better." "Yes," Marcus nodded, looking away. "Only the price of that realization was too high." They stood in silence, each absorbed in his own thoughts. The case was solved, the killer awaiting trial, but justice couldn't bring Aisha back to life, couldn't erase the pain and loss. All that remained was a lesson for the living, a reminder that love and acceptance were more important than prejudice and convention. Victoria knew this case would stay with her for a long time, not because of the complexity of the investigation, but because of its human tragedy, because of what it showed the darkest sides of human bigotry and the brightest expressions of forgiveness and growth. As she got into her car to head back to the station, One last look at the cemetery showed her Marcus still standing at Aisha's grave with a bouquet of white roses, the same ones she'd seen at their wedding. There was more love and acceptance in that gesture than 1,000 words. And maybe, Victoria thought, that acceptance, albeit belated, was the only bright spot in this dark story of a perfect girl's murder.